Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Stevenson, Director and Curator for theNate, pictured here with our advisory board. And we'd like to share a little bit of the history of theNate through this 1985 recording featuring Bill Dodd talking with past GSU President Dr. Leo Goodman-Malamuth.
The story of the Nathan Manilow Sculpture Park begins way back in 1968, 69, 70, when two individuals representing three different organizations met. The individuals I'm talking about are Louis Manilow, the son of Nathan Manilow. Nathan was the developer of Park Forest, and Nathan Manilow was the original planner of the new town, Park Forest South. When Nathan Manilow died, Louis Manilow took over the development of the town that was then called Park Forest South. Bill Engbertson was hired to be the president of Governor State University, a new university to be situated in Park Forest South. And actually, Bill Engbertson represented in those days the Governor State University Foundation, which was a not-for-profit corporation established to receive private gifts which would benefit Governor State University. These two men met. Louis Manilow was an enthusiast for contemporary art. So was Bill Engbertson. Louis Manilow was building an exciting new town, which the federal government was very interested in. Louis Manilow wrote to the federal government and said to the National Endowment for the Arts, and said, I would like to have a sculptor come to the town of Park Forest South and build sculptures in my town in the summertime. So the NEA said, yes, we would be happy to fund that. And Mark DeSuvero spent 2 summers in Park Forest South, which, interestingly enough, or at least where he lived and where he did his sculpture work, was on the property of what is now Governor State University, but which at that time was Park Forest South, and the state was at that time purchasing the land from Park Forest South and from various private owners to become the campus of Governor State University.
But it was the enthusiasm of William Engbertson, as well as the enthusiasm of Louis Manilow,
Absolutely,
who began to, they created the genesis for the idea. As I understand, then they brought Mark DeSuvero to the village who worked on the then campus, and he created the first piece. What was that piece that he created?
He created a piece called For Lady Day. He built that piece, For Lady Day, while he was on this property, the property that you and I are sitting on right now. He also built another piece while he was on this property in those 2 summers, and that piece is Prairie Chimes. Both of those pieces now remain on our property, although For Lady Day has traveled all over the country and been seen in Battery Park in New York and Grant Park in Chicago.
It seems to me that there were those 2 pieces, but it seems to me at the same time, as part of that history, that although the university was beginning to evolve, and we had those 2 pieces, I think, either on the campus or close to the campus, there was also an organization that was part of this new town development, which was also a cultural foundation, which actually began to own the pieces, original pieces of the sculpture, but place them here on loan, and they were then to go back to the town, and that never evolved. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. As a matter of fact, I should have said 4 organizations, because the town of Park Forest South also had a foundation associated with it called the Park Forest South Cultural Foundation. From the very beginning, Park Forest South was to have had a magnificent sculpture park. And in order to fund that sculpture park, what Louis Manilow did was, when Mark DeSuvero finished one of his pieces one summer, and namely For Lady Day, Louis Manilow bought it from Mark DeSuvero, and then Louis Manilow gave it to the Park Forest South Cultural Foundation. As soon as he did that, he then approached the National Endowment for the Arts and said, and they had a matching grants program, he said, here is $25,000 worth of sculpture, For Lady Day. That's what I paid for For Lady Day. Will you match that amount of money and enable me then to commission 3 other sculptors to build pieces for the sculpture park, which eventually would grace the town of Park Forest South?
But I understand, though, but as you went through that, that never really came to fruition, and in a sense, they were placed on the then campus, really kind of on loan until the other one was to grow and develop and nurture, and it never happened.
A couple of missing steps before that happened. Because Mark DeSuvero was in Park Forest South and on what is now the campus of Governor State University, all sorts of artists from Chicago spent their summers out on this property. So Richard Hunt, John Henry, John Chamberlain.
All Chicago sculptors.
All, at that time, they were all Chicago sculptors. They all came out to this campus. They had a lot of parties with Mark DeSuvero and Lou Manilow, and Bill Engbertson was present. So Bill met all of these people. I had already said that Bill was interested in sculpture. So the actual beginning of the Nathan Manilow Sculpture Park occurred when, during the same period of time, Louis Manilow, who owned the Cornell Arms apartment complex in Chicago, in Hyde Park, had commissioned a sculpture for the patio of that apartment building. And that sculpture was called Phoenix by Edwin Straub-Mannes. And the sculpture was put up, and the people in the apartment complex hated it. I mean, they literally hated it. 8 years later, I found out that Edwin Straub-Mannes, when we opened our sculpture show, said he got obscene phone calls because the sculpture. I mean, most of us who have seen the Phoenix now would say it's
Mild.
It's very mild and
very lovely.
Almost geometric.
Yes.
Almost geometric. But anyway, Louis Manilow felt that the only appropriate thing to do was to give that sculpture to someone. Well, meanwhile, he had met Bill Engbertson. Bill was enthusiastic, so he called up Bill Engbertson and said, "Bill, we have a sculpture for you. Would you accept it?" And Bill said yes. And that was actually the first sculpture acquisition of the university. And it was shipped out here. United States Steel took it apart and shipped it out on a flatbed. They arranged for that kind of contribution. And it was put in a barn. And it simply stayed in a barn for years.
So the Phoenix is in storage. Mark DeSuvero's work is intended for Park Forest South Cultural Foundation. And by 1976, Engbertson was ready to retire. So he decided to mount an exhibition to go along with the newly NEA-funded John Henry piece, Illinois Landscape No. 5. The sculptor, the campus, and the prairie was conceived.
Absolutely. The sculptor and the campus and the prairie was the name that the university gave to a sculpture exhibition which was planned at the very end of Bill Engbertson's tenure as the founding president. And its occasion was the completion of Illinois Landscape No. 5 by John Henry. I had mentioned earlier that Louis Manilow had taken For Lady Day and asked the NEA to commission 3 further works. As soon as the Phoenix was given to the university, Bill Engbertson approached the NEA and said, "I now have a sculpture appraised at such and such a value. Would you, NEA, grant me matching funds to commission a work?" And because Bill knew John Henry from, as I described, those summer meetings, and he asked John Henry if he would do a piece for Governor State University on an NEA commission, and John Henry said yes. So there was a kind of a coincidence. Pretty much at the same time that Bill Engbertson had decided to move on to something else, John Henry was completing Illinois Landscape No. 5. So Bill Engbertson said, what I'm going to do in my last months at the university is a sculpture exhibition. So he called physical plant operations and said, "Get the Phoenix out of the barn, sandblast it and paint it." He called up Mark DeSuvero and said, "Mark, Prairie Chimes, which you did here 7 years ago, is sitting out in my side yard, rusting away. We'd like to put it up in a sculpture exhibition. We'll do all the work. Where do you want it to go, and what color do you want it?" So we'll blast it. So we blasted it and painted it crimson. John Henry put up his Illinois Landscape No. 5. Lou Manilow. Bill called Lou Manilow and said, "Lou, these sculptures that the NEA has commissioned to match For Lady Day, where are they?" And Lou said, "Well, we haven't got the sculpture park. We'd be happy to put them at the university." So Bill said, "Fine, put them at the university." It was a whole series. Oh, Richard Hunt, who had been one of the people who had come out those 2 summers, and Bill had gotten to know. Richard Hunt had lectured at the university, and he said, "Richard, are there any sculptures that you?" And Richard said, "Sure, I got 5 or 6 in my backyard. Come down and make your choice." So Bill went down to Richard Hunt's backyard and selected 2 sculptures. And in fact, those 8 sculptures, there were then 8 sculptures collected, and here was Governor State University announcing a sculpture exhibition called the Sculptors Campus in the Prairie. Alan Artner came out and reviewed it, the critic for the Tribune, and announced to the entire Tribune reading audience that this was a virtual model, quote, a virtual model for all public art projects. Franz Schultz, the critic for the then Chicago Daily News, waxed eloquent about the sculpture exhibition, and Governor State University had a major sculpture exhibition put together with the Scotch tape, the rubber bands that I have described, the pieces, the bits, but lo and behold, when all of it was put together out there,
So
it was
you
major.
had, so then actually when that came about, you had eight major pieces.
We had 8.
So now they've got all the sculpture all around campus. And what does it all mean? Does anyone really care or even notice?
University community, we haven't heard a lot from the university community about the sculpture, and sometimes you wonder, does anybody even know that it's out there? And then one day, when the State Street Mall was going to be opened up, we got a call from them asking whether they could borrow one of our sculptures for 6 months because they wanted to have a sculpture. So one day, the cranes and the flatbeds appeared, and they were removing Jerry Peart's Falling Meteor, which is right outside the Hall of Governors. I received 4 phone calls that morning from people in the university saying, what are they doing with our sculpture?
They're going to take it away?
Where are they taking our sculpture, et cetera, et cetera. So that's it. That was instructive to me, and I know it was because I discussed it with you. It was instructive as to how these pieces have become a part of our environment. And for any of us now to envision the Governor State University campus absent the 21 sculptures would be, it would be barren.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the campus.
Absolutely barren. It wouldn't be as rich as it is. Et cetera. And Lou said he feels that ultimately most people who learn to live with contemporary art, most people tend eventually to identify with it, to appreciate it, and to possess it.
Through the sale of some land in 1978, in 1981 and 82, Mary Miss and Martin Puryear were commissioned to do their major land art pieces. Terry Karpowitz and Joel Shapiro pieces were acquired, and in 1983, Bruce Nauman was commissioned to do House Divided.
Very latest sculptures.
Yes.
The divided house looks like a house from the distance. I would encourage all our viewers to come and visit the divided house because it has a lot of surprises for us. But anyway, from the distance, it looks like a house. So we had arranged with the sculptor, and we had gotten a contractor to build the house, and
Laying the
so he came in,
foundation.
laying the foundation, putting up the framework, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, the contractor came into my office one day, and he said, the housing inspector from Park Forest South is out here, wanted to know why we're building this house without proper permits. And I had to explain to him, this is a sculpture. He said, don't tell me it's a sculpture, it's a house. And the guy said, if you look at the drawings, you'll understand that it's a sculpture. So
there you have it. Lou said, most people who learn to live with contemporary art tend to eventually identify with it, appreciate it, and to possess it. The Nate belongs to you. The collection has grown to 30 works of art. So this is just an introduction. Come see it for yourself. Outdoor enthusiasts and art lovers of all ages enjoy the Nate year-round, 365 days, from dawn to dusk. Free admission and free parking. In 2014, the Bill Dodd Memorial Prairie Restoration Fund became a fully funded endowment that has made the newly established Butterfly Ranch possible. Join Bill Dodd and other visionaries in supporting and celebrating the Nate. Be sure to visit our website, govst.edu/sculpture. Find us on Instagram and Facebook. Tag us and use the hashtag #TheNate so we can see your posts. Thanks for watching.